Good morning and welcome back to the pastor's porch, a time when I share some of my thoughts and reflections which percolate around in this old brain of mine. And as random as they may be, it's still my hope, though, that as I share them with you, we might all grow in our faith and connect just a little bit more with God. The other Sunday, I stopped by Kroger on my way home from church to grab some stuff to make lunch for the family. And at the checkout, I tried to use the Kroger app on my phone, which has my personalized QR code linking both my Kroger Plus card number for savings and digital coupons and things like that, and also my credit card for payment, all with the one little scan. Well, that day, despite the cashier's repeated attempts to scan it, the QR code just wouldn't scan. And so I had to do it the old-fashioned way. I had to type my number into the keypad and pull my credit card out of my wallet to insert it. Nothing too difficult, nothing I haven't done hundreds of times before, with the exception that this time it made me lose track of my phone. You see, when the phone didn't scan, and as I went to reach for my wallet and to step over to the keypad, the cashier set my phone back down on that little shelf where I had been standing. And when I finished everything, it never even crossed my mind that it was there and that I needed to pick it up. And so as I grabbed my cart and I thanked the bagger and started to stroll out of the store, just as I went through the automatic doors, I suddenly heard the faint words, "Your phone." Not sure if I had heard that correctly. I turned my head around and sure enough, those words were meant for me. The lady in line behind me was now at that little shelf in front of the cashier, and she had my phone in her hand. And I went back to her real quick, and I thanked her, and then I said to her, quote, "Well, the sad part about this is that this isn't the first time I've done this, nor is it even the second time I've done it. At least this time I didn't get all the way home before I realized it." And we chuckled, and off I went. And almost immediately, as I pushed my cart back to my car, I started thinking about the amazing fact that I actually heard her say those words, "Your phone." And it made me start thinking about my next pastor's porch. If you ask my family, they'll be the first to tell you that my hearing isn't as good as it used to be. I constantly mishear things. And part of it is not fully paying attention because my mind is always thinking about the next thing coming up, and I admit that. But there is a part that is simply my hearing going bad, such that I can hear sounds, but I can't fully distinguish the various syllables. And so words become smushed and unintelligible at times. And it's a big joke when my family will say something, and then I'll repeat back what I thought I heard. And they'll crack up because what I had heard wasn't anywhere close to what they had actually said. Now, sometimes I do know what they said, and I just do it to be funny. But many times, I can't figure it out. And my brain is like our phone's autocorrect, trying to deduce what they said, but most of the time being completely incorrect. And so the fact that as I was already strolling out of the store, with all the other noise and the beeping of the various checkout lanes, and with my mind already thinking about something else, the fact that I heard those two small words, "your phone," well, it just amazed me. And that got me thinking about our spiritual hearing. Do we hear God? Now, I'm not talking about hearing God literally speaking to you in some miraculous way, like everyone that was standing around heard God's voice at Jesus' baptism. I'm really talking about hearing what God says to us as we move about, such that we hear him and he gets our attention like I did when I heard those faint words at Kroger. I'm talking about hearing his truth. I'm talking about hearing his will in our lives. I'm talking about hearing the Spirit direct us as we walk through life. With all of the confusion around us, with all of the moving about here and there, with the 100 different things going on, all fighting for our attention, it's easy for God's voice to be drowned out, and for us to be deafened to what God says to us, or to not easily distinguish what God's revealed will says that we should do in certain things. Now, it's not that we actively want to do that, or to have it be that way. I mean, most of us who might be watching this video would never say we purposefully want to be deaf to what God says. Unless, of course, we're wanting to indulge in some sort of sin, and then we do that. But for the most part, we don't actively want to shut off our ears. Yet our hearing is deafened due to circumstances. His voice is muted due to our emotions or our tiredness or sickness, work pressures, family issues, cares, and so on. Those things are what grab our attention. Those things are what speak loudest to our hearts and our minds. Those things are what scream, hey, pay attention to me right now. And so we do. Usually, though, at the expense of what God says. Because usually God isn't screaming at us like those things do. You see, we can't hear God if we're always talking over God. You can't hear God if you do not allow him to speak to you, or if you always crowd him out. And so, how do we become more attuned to God's voice? Well, I have a few thoughts and I have a few suggestions on that, but I'm going to only mention the top one this morning for this video. And I think you know in your heart what that answer might be. First and foremost, the answer is stop. Simply stop for a moment to focus on God. Jesus did this repeatedly. The scriptures tell us that he would consistently go off from everyone else. He would distance himself from the crowds, from the others, for moments of simply focusing on his heavenly Father. I did a quick search about this topic, and I came across one blog post which laid out Jesus doing this or encouraging this in 6 different ways. And this blogger said that Jesus chose a moment of solitude first to prepare for a major task or work, as he did when he fasted alone for 40 days before his earthly ministry began, right after his baptism in Luke chapter 4. Second, to recharge after hard work, just as Jesus did when he encouraged the disciples to separate themselves from the people when they had returned from going out in the ministry that he sent them out to do in Mark chapter 6. And third, to work through grief, as Jesus did after he learned that his cousin John the Baptist was beheaded in Matthew chapter 14. Fourth, before making an important decision, as he did before choosing his 12 disciples in Luke chapter 6. Fifth, in a time of distress, as he did in the Mount of Olives, if you remember, before his arrest in Gethsemane, the night before his crucifixion, which we find in Luke chapter 22. And finally, sixth, to focus on prayer, as Luke tells us Jesus did several other times throughout his earthly ministry, Luke chapter 5, verse 16. And at the end of the blog, there was a tweet that was quoted, and I don't know who originally tweeted it, so I can't credit it because they didn't, but it said, quote, "Time spent with God is not time spent alone." Time spent with God is not time spent alone. So take time to stop what you're doing, and to spend a few moments to ask the Lord to speak to you and to direct you. And then let him speak as you listen. What does his word and his truth have to say to you? What would God have you hear? What would God have you to do? So those are my brief thoughts from the porch this week. And I hope that it's been helpful to you, and pray that at least in some small way you have been drawn closer to God today. Until next time, God bless. And for those in the Katy area who watch this, I look forward to seeing you on Sunday morning.